Some of the big news going on. A lot of people have been glued to the television screen all over the country watching the Lindsay Clancy case. Jurors are currently deliberating whether she is criminally responsible for the deaths of her three young children at the family's Massachusetts home. And that happened back in January 2023. Clancy's defense does not dispute that she killed the children, but argues that she was experiencing severe postpartum psychosis and lacked criminal responsibility. Prosecutors contend that Clancy planned the killings and understood that the actions were wrong. The jury can consider several possible outcomes, including first-degree murder, second-degree murder, manslaughter, or a finding that Clancy was not criminally responsible because of a mental disease or defect. And we have with us attorney Bayoji Akingbola, who is a criminal defense attorney here in Harris County and also a former prosecutor, so he knows both sides of the fence. Glad to have you back, and congratulations on the new bundle of joy in your family.
Thank you. Thank you.
You were on, what is that, post-maternity leave for a while from the Factor?
Well, you know, I'm a solo practitioner, so there's really no such thing. I had to just 2 weeks, and I was right back at it at work.
All right. Well, let's take a look at this Lindsay Clancy case for those who don't quite understand what's going on here. And I kind of did a deep dive today, and it's such a disturbing case. And you now, as a parent, you just know how horrible that situation is. And when you hear the details and the testimony of her using her exercise band to strangle the three children to death, then trying to slit her own wrists and cut her own neck and threw herself from the second floor of a house. It's just like a house of horrors. And what happened there, it's my understanding the husband went out to get dinner, and the youngest daughter, the 5-year-old, some stool softener from the CVS pharmacy, or the pharmacy not too far, 3 minutes from their house. When he came back, it was like all hell had broke loose. So what are we looking at? Do you think we will hear from the jury tomorrow in this case?
I wouldn't be surprised if it takes another full day of deliberation. They have quite a lot of evidence for them to go over. And this is a case that is very emotionally wrought. My understanding is that there are 9 female jurors and 3 male jurors. And in a case where there's so many options on the table, you know, first degree murder, second degree murder, manslaughter, and not guilty by reasons of insanity, the jury has a lot to consider and grappling with how the evidence aligns with all of these options for their final verdict.
And one of the things that they made clear was there's no dispute that she killed her children. There's no dispute there. It's whether or not she knew she was doing the wrong thing, right or wrong, at the time that she took those children's lives. When you look at the defense and the case that they put on in the prosecution, is there a slam dunk anywhere in there from your perspective?
I don't think this is a slam dunk for either side. I think this is going to be a very tough case. You know, the defense did a good job of first and foremost humanizing her as an individual struggling with taking care of 3 young children. And I think that's where having 9 female jurors is going to be highly relevant, because they can, you know, place themselves in her shoes as far as what that struggle is like. They also did a good job in pointing out some of her mental health struggles. I actually saw a few clips of the defense's cross-examination of the medical professionals that the state provided as witnesses. And they did an excellent job of turning those state witnesses and making them say defense-oriented concessions of, making concessions of things that they may have missed, of her potentially being over medicated, them not taking seriously her medical issues. And then lastly, what defense did was brought forth some medical experts of their own, forensic psychologists that testified that she was experiencing postpartum psychosis. So that's what now the jury has in front of them. And what I find interesting in the state of Massachusetts is that the state has the burden of proving that it's not postpartum psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
So I think shifting that burden, or not necessarily shifting, but keeping that burden with the state of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that it's not postpartum psychosis, I think it then slants in favor of the defense, because what the defense can argue is, because the state has the burden of proving that it's not psychosis, if you are a juror that's in the situation of, I don't know if it was postpartum psychosis, or I don't know if she intended. If that's you, then the state hasn't met their burden of proving that it was not postpartum psychosis, that it was not, that she did this due to the insanity that she was feeling at the time. And if that's the case, then you have to acquit by reasons of insanity. So I think just because of how the law is written in Massachusetts, the defense does have a slight edge in this case.
Now, how does this, Bayoji, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, this happened the first year that I moved to Houston.
Andrea Yates?
Yeah, Andrea Yates, where she killed her 5 children. And of course, they brought in mental capacity, postpartum psychosis as well. But she was found guilty initially of murder. Her verdict was overturned, I think, in 2005. But is this much different from Andrea Yates' case?
Actually, it's very similar. Her verdict.
Okay. Bayoji
by reasons of, and very similar set of facts. In this case, Lindsay Clancy is accused of killing all 3 of her children. In the Andrea Yates case, it was 5 children.
Yeah.
The only difference is the slight subtlety of the law. In Texas, the defense has the burden of proving by the preponderance that she is not guilty by reasons of insanity, which is more likely than not that she's not guilty by reasons of insanity. So even though the defense had that burden in the Texas case, she was still acquitted and found not guilty by reasons of insanity. So I think, if anything, the Andrea Yates case may inform what we can expect here in this case with Lindsay Clancy. And I think additionally, we have to also take into consideration where we are as a society. Back when the Andrea Yates case was going on, there was a lot of moral outrage by women who were mothers and saying, how could she do this?
Right.
Now, fast forward 20 years later, if we look on social media, it's split. There's actually a lot of people, a lot of women in particular, that are saying, we stand with Lindsay Clancy, we empathize with her. Some are even going so far as to sharing their own horrific stories of considering harming their kids, or things that they've been struggling with, their own postpartum issues. So I think in terms of the climate that we are in as a society, that also may potentially cut in favor of Lindsay Clancy in this case.
It's almost, Bayoji, like an evolving society where we accept mental diagnosis quicker than we did in the past. We would blow it off in the past as like, this is just an evil woman who wanted to kill her children. But now that we know more about the mind, and psychology is advanced, and psychotherapy is now recognized more by the world, I think there's room for people to have some doubts. When you hear her defense attorney say that she was overprescribed medication as well, what are your thoughts about that? Him pointing the finger at her doctors in the past of just filling her with pills.
I think it goes more to generate empathy and paint her as the victim, that because she was over medicated, that it created this, how did I put this? It just created an imbalance, a imbalance in her brain chemistry to cause her to behave in such a way that she wasn't really fully in control of her actions. I think they did a really good job of laying that out for the jurors, and it's something that the state's going to have to overcome in their case.
And when the state takes on a case like this, do you think the prosecutors truly believe, or is it law enforcement officers who investigate it, they truly believe this woman is a monster and not have any kind of mental health issues. Do they believe that? Or are they saying the evidence shows that?
I think an ethical prosecutor, and I'm going to give most prosecutors the benefit of a doubt, are looking at the evidence and they formulate their opinions based upon the evidence. I've had cases where I've raised an insanity defense and the prosecutor actually agreed, and we were able to have that individual committed. So for a prosecutor to take this trial and go this far in their case, it means that they believe, based upon the evidence, that she intended to kill her 3 children and it had nothing to do with her mental health issues. And I think the big thing that they're pointing at is, it seems as though and this is the prosecutor's perspective, that she may have planned this. What they're saying, you had mentioned earlier that the husband went to go get dinner and to go get some drugs for the kids. They're saying that the wife sent the husband out to do that. Yeah. And that gave her that window of opportunity to kill the children while the husband was out running these errands. They also point to her search history, where she's looking up things like suicide and other things about, harming herself, where they're saying this is something that she was planning for some days. To me, I think the truth is somewhat in the middle.
Is it possible, Bayoji, to be planning your own death, but still not mentally be there?
Oh, for sure. And, it's funny you point to that, because I believe the defense attorney actually said that as a rebuttal, that if anything, the fact that she not only killed the 3 children, but also went to great lengths of, slitting her wrist, slitting her throat, and then jumping out of a 2-story building that has rendered her permanently paralyzed, indicates that she was not in her right state of mind. The average person doesn't self-harm. And it's kind of a stretch to believe that someone would harm themselves to the extent of permanently paralyzing themselves as a form of a cover-up to, evade police or evade prosecution. So I think that's actually something that the jurors are also going to consider in determining whether or not she was in her right state of mind when this happened.
No, there have been 21 days of testifying and 84 witnesses. Was there any witness that stood out to you that helped or hurt either side?
Like I said before,
the husband was first, and his 911 call was so gut-wrenching and just horrible that they chose not to play it for the media. They only played it for the jurors and those who were inside the court, but they wouldn't allow it to be heard on television or recorded at all, because they said his screams and his yells once he found his children was almost a primal sound that didn't sound like it was from a human.
I can only imagine. I think for the defense, 3 key witnesses, 2 of which come from the state, is using the testimony of family members such as Lindsay Clancy's mother-in-law, who stated that she was expressing mental health issues after having the children, using those state witnesses and then turning them into defense witnesses. I think that's very compelling. And we saw that again, and this is the second witness, with the medical professionals that were treating Lindsay Clancy. I saw the clips where they had to, where the defense attorney pointed out some key mistakes and key errors in their treatment and diagnosis of Lindsay Clancy, which I think may be very compelling for a jury. And then finally, when a defense attorney presents their own expert, who has that gravitas of expertise and study and experience, coming out and saying, hey, look, I've evaluated this case and I do believe she had postpartum psychosis. That's also going to be potentially compelling testimony for the jurors to consider. So I say those 3 key witnesses is what the defense has working in favor for them.
What has her demeanor in the time you've been able to look at some video clips and some reports? What has her demeanor, Lindsay's demeanor, been like in court?
Truth be told, I haven't really been paying as much attention to her demeanor as I have been with the witnesses. I haven't seen anything that stand out one way or the other. I think one thing that jurors are going to try to look for is, does she have any level of remorse? And I can't answer that, but sometimes when a defendant is either too dismissive or not
Blasé in court.
engaged, yeah, they may take offense to that. On the other hand, a good defense attorney might point out that this, even as she is now, is indicative of some of the mental health issues that she's experiencing.
And of course, she's paralyzed from the waist down now, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Bayoji Akingbola, anything else? Well, I'll ask you this. If you were a betting man, what would you say, which direction the jury would go in?
If I were a betting man, I think first-degree murder is off the table because that has to prove premeditation, and I don't think you quite get there. I think, especially we're dealing with a white woman, which is relevant in the criminal justice system. I think there's going to be more empathy for her. I believe we're probably going to be landing somewhere between manslaughter and not guilty by reason of insanity.
All right, Bayoji Akingbola, criminal defense attorney, former Harris County prosecutor. Thank you for joining us, and we appreciate your expertise here on The Factor Uncensored. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. All righty, where's the gang? I bet they outside on the smoke break. Sonora out there smoking black and mild.